Hello, beloveds. So, Alex and I are so happy to be here with you. And today we're going to be chatting about geopathic stress and what that is and how that does or doesn't affect the land and our lives and our inner and outer landscape. So, Alex, why don't you kind of start off with what is geopathic stress?
Well, geopathic stress, which is also known as geostress, is a natural thing that occurs in nature. It happens usually in areas that have some high energy formations geologically, like fault lines, volcanoes, that type of thing. But it can also be induced by human activity. And whether it's natural or human induced, it has a direct impact on health, on well-being, also on mental focus and consciousness, and potentially on outcomes that have to do with your business, your income, and your relationships, as well as a family.
Yeah, yeah. And I love, though, I think the really interesting thing about the land and working with the land is the land, through nature can have geopathic stress, right? Or through people digging and construction work and various things. However, when the land has the geopathic stress, the land is okay. It's not hurting with that. It's really more when we live on top of this energy. It's kind of like a lot of the ley lines of energy, right? Whether we look at certain energy lines of being a positive or a negative, right? If there's such a thing. But even a lot of these sacred sites, Newgrange, Stonehenge, are all built on these lines of energy, which are actually really powerful for healing, right? Because they hold such powerful energy. However, it would never be recommended to live on a sacred site, right? Because that energy is too much for our system all the time. So do you kind of want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, what's interesting about geopathic stress is that a lot of nature actually thrives in geopathic stress zones. So, strictly speaking, geopathic stress is something that relates to humans. We don't tend to do very well in geopathic stress zones. And another thing or just to give you some examples, for example, horses, dogs are very sensitive to it and don't like that kind of energy. Deer typically will never sleep in an area that has geopathic stress in it. And humans, like I mentioned earlier, can react with various types of physical illness or mental discomfort of various types. But there are other animals and life forms that actually thrive in them. And insects, for example, a lot of insects, wasps, bees, bats love them. Fungi actually do very well in geostress areas. Some animals are kind of ambivalent, like cats, for example, do well in both zones. So cats can live very well in non-geopathically stressed areas, but they also like areas where there's geopathic stress. So they tend to kind of gravitate to that. On the other hand, babies who are very sensitive to these energies often will move away from the geopathic stress zone simply because they don't like the energy and the way it feels in their body. A lot of plants do very well in geopathic stress zones as well. So there's that kind of interesting dichotomy. The other thing that's interesting that Amanda mentioned, which I think is really kind of quite fascinating, is that often geopathic stress is connected to sacredness. So, for example, a lot of the most sacred places on the planet are near fault lines, like the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, for example, is a very clear example. There's a fault line, there's a geological movement, earthquakes, often volcanoes, and they become very sacred, and civilizations and cultures kind of recognize that and thrive in that. They go there for the religious or spiritual experience. But at the same time, they can also induce geopathic stresses. So you have this kind of odd relationship between the two. You would never want to live in these areas. So in our course, we try to focus on the practical aspects of geopathic stress, right, Amanda? Mm-hmm. Looking at how to recognize it, how to identify it, how to make a distinction between that and sacredness in the landscape, and then how to protect yourself from it.
Yeah, I love that. So it's basically like, look at where your cat's lying in the house. That might give you some indications, right? Or I think it's really fascinating, from a Feng Shui standpoint, because we have from our date of birth, certain directions that we can sleep in and sit in and work in and eat in that can support us and kind of have us more in that divine flow, and some that create more of a block of the energy. And, it's like some people will naturally go into those places. And then some people, you find that out and you sit yourself in it and you get supported. Whereas it's so interesting, you can put a baby down, to sleep and position them. And then you come into the room and they'll just have, like, when they're not really up and moving to that extent, but they will still have managed to orientate themselves or slightly rolled off wherever that the energy line is placed on. So it's like, it says when we come in, we have this deep knowing and connection for what is our highest good and what is supportive. And then through different experiences in our lives, we start to not trust ourselves on that level, whereas we come in innately knowing. And I think that's so important for us to know and embody and kind of start to remember that. It's so powerful for people to know because, both you and I practice Feng Shui and land healing, right? And a lot of people think, we Feng Shui the space and energy can flow, but it's so important that land, and that soul agreement that we have with that land that we're living on, breathing, sleeping on, this soul contract that we have. So whether we've kind of moved into a space that is bringing up things that are maybe dormant within us because there's a vibration in there that we hold, that the land holds, that, as you were saying, Alex, can bring challenges financially, in relationship, health-wise, right? So let's say we've purchased land or we've acquired land in some way, and then we move in and we could start to have relationship challenges or whatever any of these challenges we've discussed. I think, if for our listeners that are like, okay, so, or you're not sleeping well, and then that can cause challenges in all areas of your life, right? How would somebody know kind of like, this could be something I need to check? Because I feel like health, wealth, and love, they're the things that everybody really wants to find balance in their lives, right? Joy, vibrant health, vitality, loving relationships in our lives, and that abundance to be free and comfortable. So what are things that people would look out for if they kind of are like, I wonder, like they're listening to this and like, I wonder, do I have this under my home or within the land that I live on? What are some major telltale signs? Obviously, other than things that we've talked about with babies and cats, but we've talked about the land can flourish still because sometimes you think there'd be obvious things. It's not something that's visible to the eye, like, oh, there's a crack in the earth, But what are some telltale signs that you might see inside your home, you might see in the land, or that would just kind of help gosh, I think this could be what's going on here?
It's interesting because a lot of these signals are actually quite visible. Vegetation is probably the simplest one because a lot of plant life won't react very well, won't thrive in areas of geopathic stress. So you may see, for example, a lawn that has an area that's always patchy or dying or not thriving. When we douse for it, when we look for it in geomantic terms, we typically find a line of geopathic stress of some sort. Same thing happens in hedges. You see a beautiful hedge and there's this area that's always brown. Or you plant some beautiful rose bushes or some other plant that is going to thrive in that type of soil and it refuses to thrive. So that's one way. We've talked about animal behavior as well. But there's also a sense in which you personally can also start to react to that. Problems with sleep, disturbances, in the middle of the night, you wake up with anxiety. You can't explain it for other reasons. So there's a lot of psychological impacts. Geostress typically impacts humans. It starts with kind of simple things like sleeplessness, agitation. Then it goes into the more deeper psychological, states, anxieties, kind of an odd disassociation, almost like you're not quite sure, confusion. For example, geopathic stress has been associated with areas in highways where there's lots of accidents with no other reason. And it's because people fog out. They mentally fog out. They stop concentrating, and that's when the accident happens. Also, areas in homes where there's persistent problems. People keep tripping or falling. We talked about insect activity. So if there's pest infestation in one area of the house, that's almost always an indication that there's probably geopathic stress in the area. Now, there are more advanced systems of detection, and dowsing is probably the most important one. And in our course, that's one of the techniques we teach you, and we take you all the way through the early stages and middle level and then advanced levels of dowsing for this type of energy in the land.
I love that. And one thing I think that's really huge for the pair of us, Alex, is, we talk about this, and I know even personally for myself, like as we heal the land, it heals us, right? And our work is our medicine. Like those are so vibrant and true for me anyway, personally. And I always know that if somebody shows up for our training or they want to work with their land, they're ready for some kind of healing. They're ready for some kind of transformation, and it just happens, whether it's a conscious or unconscious. You can talk to anybody, that's come to our training, just the healing and the transformation and the expansion when we really do that work. It's interesting. So it could be just someone's like, I'm not sleeping well, right? And they may not connect that in that way. Now, ultimately, the not sleeping well might have to do with things that haven't been resolved within, right? Wounds, trauma, whatever that may, whether it's ancestral or childhood or whatever it may be. And so they're carrying this vibration. And so things like not being able to sleep and feeling really anxious and stressed out and everything. So then they may decide, okay, I think maybe they've listened to one of our other podcasts that we've done, or they've heard from somebody. So they're like, okay, I want to work with the land. So that's where we come in, or all these amazing students that we've been training that do this work, these light workers wanting to be of service. People start to work on the geopathic stress, but then how does, like, I'd love to hear your insight of how do you feel that deeper inner healing happens within somebody because they're working with geopathic stress on their land.
Yeah, geopathic stress at first sounds scary, right? Oh my God, there's this energy in the land that's going to be negative. It might hurt my family or myself or my child or my animals. And in a sense, it's true. It can happen. And often it's why we get called in a situation. A farm may have animals that are not doing well, and there's a suspicion there's something in the land, right? But when you start to go deeper into that, into what's happening in the land, now, the matrix of the land itself, typically there's a relationship between the land and us, right? We end up in the land for our own reasons. And there's a Feng Shui rule that says that we always inhabit the land or the home that matches our level of vibration. So if we vibrate very high, we end up in land that also vibrates very high and in a particular way. And the same thing is true about geopathic stresses. So I see geopathic stresses as a spiritual opportunity, because clearly all of us have a light side, which is angelic, conscious, kind, compassionate. But you also have a shadow side, in which we're confused. Maybe we're carrying family stuff. We've had trauma of our own that we need to process, that we're in the process, or in the process of developing through or going through. And the land, because it loves us deeply, it is the mother. She will take us into that journey of discovery and transformation. So the healing that happens when we affect what we call earth healing or earth acupuncture, which are various terms about how to resolve geopathic stress in the land, almost invariably has a relationship also to what happens to us, both as the people who live in that land or the home, and also as the consultants, the geomancers, the Feng Shui practitioners who are helping other people to make that transformation as well. Whereas at the beginning, geopathic stress can be challenging. To me, it represents a brilliant opportunity to resolve problems, on a personal and family level. But it also indicates a potential to resolve them in a much larger social context, because geopathic stress, in a city, for example, where there's been a lot of construction, excavation, roads, highways, tunnels, starts to impact pretty much the entire city. So by working in little areas, one at a time, resolving geopathic stresses, learning how to heal land, how to use gardens, how to use beautiful open spaces, how to relate to water, how to relate to earth, and healing whatever geopathic stress we find, we can also start to impact what happens to the society around us. So it becomes a really beautiful work. It's light work in the highest sense of the word.
I love that. That's so, so beautiful. And so what I'm hearing, and I love it, is it's the opening. That it's the opening of that journey. It's not, oh my gosh, I've got this, I need to be in fear. It's actually like the catalyst that facilitate that. And I love that, because we always talk about it's got to start within us, right? And then when we do that, it's within our family, within our homes, and then it goes out within our communities. And then it's just that ripple effect. We all live in the land, all of humanity do. So I love when Alex and I love teaching together, because Alex really brings in the academic, but also the spiritual ritual. I mean, he's just so gifted. But it's just such a merging of the divine feminine and the divine masculine, and like the inner mother and the inner father, right? Because we call Mother Earth, Father Sky for a reason. And we are that connector, right? Between Mother Earth and Father Sky. And when we consciously go, wow, I am part of this land that I live on, like the sky above me, like not just the earth and land, there's a consciousness that's brought in, and this inner desire to treat it and connect with it on such a sacred spiritual level, that relationship, which we call Mother Earth, mothering within ourselves, Father Sky, fathering within ourselves, changes for our whole lives forever. It opens us to the next level of consciousness that, as you said, I love that, Alex, light working. So once somebody works with it, you find out that it's something that's there in the land, you work with healing it. It can help within our cells, our physical cells, our homes, our bodies, our families, the land. What are some results that you've seen? Because I know you've worked with so many amazing people around the world. What are some things, and maybe you would share a specific experience that you've had?
Of course, there's so many. Just starting with the basics, like a garden that isn't thriving. For example, you have a beautiful garden, or you want to raise vegetables, or even have animals, right? But geopathic stress is impacting on that, potentially decreasing yields, not allowing plants to thrive. Calves, or animals are sickly, or they don't reproduce. For example, the problems can get serious. By applying some earth healing, according to these approaches, you can regenerate the land, so your garden becomes lush. The veggies are delicious and fruitful. But there's also ways in which, for example, by resolving a geopathic stress problem, you can help a family to resolve an internal problem within the family. You can help a woman conceive. You can help a young child thrive intellectually, because potentially geopathic stress may be impacting their mental faculty, right? Their focus. We talked about focus before. So studies and at the home, I've seen a lot of that happening as well. Then in a larger context, geopathic stress in commercial environments, for example, can be actually quite negative, because a customer may walk into a store, for example, or a worker may walk into an office space, and they happen to be sitting or working in an area where there's geopathic stress. And because of the impact on their physical body, they could get sick over time. But also, on a more day-to-day basis, they may lose focus. The customer may come in, forget that they wanted to buy something, so the merchant now loses income. So there's a direct correlation between geopathic stress and outcomes in a real sense, in terms of the business impact of how this works. And I've done a lot of remediation of geopathic stress in commercial zones, supermarkets, malls, that type of thing. And you see the results quite quickly. We have a lot of clients that are really grateful that we got them out of these holes, because they couldn't figure a way. They have experts doing marketing, experts doing, social media. They know how to manage their businesses. They're experts at this, and yet they can't make it work. We come in, we diagnose it, and say, oh my God, there's a particular form of geopathic stress. And of course, there's many different forms. And of course, we go through all of them. There's different ways of remediating different forms. And then you apply the correction, and all of a sudden, stuff starts to happen that's positive for a family, if it's a family context, a business, if it's the business context. It can also happen, of course, in terms of community. We've done a lot of work on large land development, which involves building schools, building public facilities, bringing in, utilities, sewage, electricity, and all that. All of that can also induce geopathic stress. So if you're adding a room to your property, or you're building a new house, you may inadvertently create geopathic stress if you happen to touch on certain elements in the land, right? Amanda, that's kind of one of the ways in which it happens.
Yeah.
So you need to know how to avoid that as well. And Feng Shui has tools, Geomancer has tools, and we teach you all of those tools in this course.
Absolutely. And, clearly through just listening to Alex and the pair of his conversations, Alex has been doing this work for over 40 years and is so gifted and worked with so many clients all over the world and so knowledgeable. But I want to bring it back to be a little bit more personal now, if that's okay. And I would love to hear from your heart. And you're sharing a lot of reasons as to why, of course, you would do this work in the world, the results that people get. But truly from your heart and soul, what is it that makes you show up every day to choose to carry on doing this after 40 years of doing this work? What is it that kind of lights you up and fulfills you and sustains you on a daily basis?
That's a beautiful question. It's a question that we should all ask ourselves. And for me, it's been the discovery that by working with the land, by honoring it, and even in very basic ways, by respecting it, but also by attempting to correct problems that the land develops, like geopathic stress, helping it to heal in a sense, particularly at a time when we're experiencing climate change, degradation of the environment, biological diversity losses. what it gives me is the infinite satisfaction of contributing to that healing and living in harmony with the land. And I used to be kind of a brainy intellectual. I mean, just kind of Amanda knows me very well. I'm a bit of a geeky nerd when it comes to a little too much on the masculine side, right? But the land taught me to be soft, to relish the moment, to live in relationship, to pay more attention to how I relate to the land, to people, to seek a higher sense and a higher purpose by my relation to the land and its elements. And what that produced over the years of doing this is a sense of ease, of living a life that's simple, that's direct, that it doesn't involve struggle, it doesn't involve conflict. Every time I meet a person on the street, even if a total stranger, we can connect instantly because my body recognizes their body, my energy field recognizes their energy field. We're both supported by the land. So the land that we're from, that we've lived on, stepped on, recognizes the land they stepped on. So all of a sudden you get this magical relationship of forces that are like a gigantic matrix. It's almost like a giant spider web that connects you to everything that is. So you no longer feel alone. You no longer feel alienated. A lot of the emotional issues that we all carry get softened, if not resolved. Trauma can be addressed very, very quickly and very directly, and all of us have had trauma. And then there's a sense of joy. One of the great things that happens in our course, and Amanda always relishes this, is what happens to the students, right? Because the students come and they want to learn, and they have multiple reasons why they come. But over time, all of a sudden we get this little community. We call it our circle, of helpers and angels and enlightened folk. And everybody reports, sooner or later that this has produced a certain reaction in their full energy system, at the physical, mental, spiritual, and energetic levels. And to me, that's really what we're here, why we're here, what we do, and we're delighted and honored to be able to offer and share this with everybody.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I mean, no matter what kind of a day you're having, and this is not superficial by any means, but just no matter what kind of how you're feeling, you can just go barefoot out in the land, you can go step into the forest, you can just listen to the sea, you can sit by a river, and it's just like, it just has that ability just to wash it all away, clear it, blow it away with the wind, the sun burns it, whatever it may be. And if the land gives us and sustain us the air that we breathe, the water that we drink. And so to be able to return that gift, that we receive constantly, it is the purpose. Just I was sharing with Alex, I was at a festival with my children, and it's on sacred land here in Ireland, Ishnock, the fire festival. And like my children just pulled off their shoes, and then they were just, they're free anyway, but they were you could see the land moving through them and them moving to the land, and there is just this exchange. And so when we, as Alex said, consciously choose to tune in, it really balances, I think, that yin and the yang within us, right? Because, we have the full moon, the sun moon, the waxing, the waning, just like we have winter and summer and spring and autumn. And the mother nature, the land, the earth just brings us back home to that, just keeps bringing us back home. So I think one of the greatest gifts that we can feel is at home within ourselves, at home within our soul, that connection to our physical body, spirit, and the land. And it all meets right there at our heart. The Om Mani Padme Hum, right? So that's the gift.
I love you mentioned your kids, Amanda, because my daughter, I have a daughter who's in her 30s now. And whenever she has an important decision to make, whenever she's, having difficulty or whatever, she always says, Dad, we got to go out in the wilderness. Let's go find it. So we go there. We usually give it a weekend or something like that. And, she knows the techniques, of course, that we teach in the course. So she goes into the process. She reconnects to the land, to herself, to her ancestors. And I can see the change, over a couple of hours, oh my God, there's this thing going on in with her and within her. And as a parent, this is such a joy because you can see it happening right in front of you. And of course, it happens to you, but it's different when you see it to your own. Right. And then by the end of the weekend, there's this brightness. So did you figure out your problems? Yeah. No, I know what to do now.
And isn't that so beautiful? And it's accessible to all of us. It's everybody has land around them, a garden, a park we can go to, and it's a gift. So just that reminder, just to come home to ourselves through the land.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing, Alex. That was absolutely beautiful, gorgeous as always. And Alex and I have lots of other wonderful episodes on the podcast that we'll link into in the show notes. And we would love to hear from you. We would love to hear experiences that you've had with the land, connections that you've had, ways that you possibly could be identifying geopathic stress, or even just that connection that we were describing, how you feel that. We would love to hear from you. That fills us up, right, Alex?
Yeah. We want to make that circle really big.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please join us.
Yeah. So thank you, Alex, for being here. Thank you to everybody for listening.